And hello and welcome everyone to Sound Off with Sinkoff. So glad you are with us here today. Sound Off with Sinkoff, of course, sponsored by the Sinkoff Realty Group right here in Del Mar, New York. Well, it's the second Sound Off with Sinkoff podcast, and it is my pleasure to bring in the current St. Rose women's basketball coach and a good friend of mine. I've known him for almost 20 years, Mr. Will Brown. Will, welcome to Sound Off.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you back in the sports game. I know you really never left, but it's nice to see you, hosting this podcast, and I appreciate you asking me to come on.
Awesome. Well, we thank you for joining me. I know we're going to get into women's college hoops, like, the tournament. We'll talk about the men, UConn winning the national championship. But first, let's talk a little bit about you. You were named the St. Rose women's coach in June of 23. You find out in December, at the beginning of your season, your school is closing. You managed to have a 21-7 record. You're 17-5 in the conference. You get to the NCAA tournament. What was last year like for you professionally and even personally?
I have to be honest with you. Late May of 23, when Lori Anktel, the director of athletics at St. Rose, approached me about the position, it's not something that I was really thinking about doing. I'd never coached women's basketball before. Lori kind of asked me to, think about it a little bit, take your time, talk to your family, talk to some people, and, we'll keep the lines of communication open. Then one day my wife just said to me, why don't you do it? Why not? We really want to stay in the area. We're not looking to relocate at this point in time. Our older son was going to get ready to play his senior season in college over at Russell Sage. So, coaches always like to say, why not us? My wife looked at me and said, why not do it? It'll be fun. And then, I took a little more time, did my research and, agreed to do it. And I have to be honest with you, early on, I was like a deer in headlights, trying to navigate through it, figure it out, really get to understand these personalities and, what it was going to be like to coach women's basketball. I had to try to add some recruits, hire an assistant coach. And, fast forward to the fall when classes started and we started working out, it was just really enjoyable. I have to admit, I had no idea that the school was in jeopardy of closing. That came as a surprise. There's no manual as far as how to handle these situations. I don't know anyone that went through a similar situation. So we had to kind of navigate it together. Lori, her administration team, my coaching staff, our players, we just really stuck together and said, hey, instead of hanging our heads, let's deal with the adversity. Let's control the narrative. Let's try to do something special, memorable. Let's do something for the institution and for all of the alumni that came through this program, prior.
Will, your team first in the country in defensive points allowed, defensive field goal percentage, defensive three-point field goal percentage. You obviously, no secret, you coached at Albany for, from 2002 to 2021. You go to 5 NCAA tournaments. How different was the women's game from the men's game? Something that you really cut your teeth in, and that was the men's game.
Yeah, the games are definitely different. I wasn't going into this naive, thinking basketball is basketball. That would have been very foolish of me. The rules are different, so I had to learn as much as I could in a short period of time. It's more of it's a below the rim game, but it also, as I found, it's an enjoyable game. The players, if they really know that you care about them and that you can develop that trust, they'll do anything for you. So we, once we became more familiar with the personnel on our roster, it became, how do we put this team in the best position to be successful? How can this group play where we can win games? because I told them we are going to win. I didn't tell them how many games we were going to win. This senior class, I was their third coach. They had never experienced winning. I told them we are going to win. Just please trust me and trust Carly Boland, my assistant, and embrace what we're asking you to do. And it's the old saying, defense travels and it travels well. Every time we step on the floor, if we defend and rebound, we'll have a chance to win. You're not going to make shots, every night, but you can defend and rebound and really compete every night. And that's kind of what we hung our hat on. We're going to defend, we're going to rebound, we're going to compete, and we're going to be the most prepared team in the country. And we felt that if the players bought in, that would be good enough on most nights. Our biggest challenge throughout the season is finding where our next basket was going to come from. There were nights where we struggled mightily on the offensive side of the ball. But again, anyone that sat behind our bench during the game heard me tell our team, do what we do. Don't waver from what we do. This is who we are. And our kids really embraced it. I'll tell you what, once I understood their personalities and, I was told that on the women's side, the student athletes a little more sensitive, a little more emotional. Once I figured that piece out, it was smooth sailing. I mean, this group was an absolute pleasure to coach. I really think that they gave me more than I gave them. It helped me grow and develop. And then the rules piece, under a minute to go, you call a timeout, you can advance the ball. Every free throw, when you're in the bonus, it's automatic 2 shots. That's something I wasn't used to. So the last couple of years have been good for me going from coaching a Division I men's game to the professional level to the women's game. It's really helped me grow and evolve as a coach. And I think that's what it's all about. We always ask our players to get better, but what are we doing as coaches to get better?
Will, of course, mentioned the pro game. He coached the Albany Patroons in the basketball league. Will, you had, have ball will travel, will, pardon the pun. You have been successful everywhere you've been. You go to 5 NCAA tournaments at Albany. You coach the Patroons. They're 29-4. You're the coach of the year, Northeast Division champs, Eastern Regional champs, Eastern Conference champs. How was that for you, coaching the Patroons? How different was it? I know it was drastically different from being at Albany, but how different was that experience, and what did you learn about yourself during that time?
I became a much more patient coach coaching the Patroons. One thing that I needed to understand quickly is you're not coaching college kids anymore. You're coaching grown men, and this is their livelihood. So as much as they want to enjoy team success, they're motivated to have individual success because they're looking to get their next job, whether it's professionally overseas, whether it's the NBA G League. They all have goals, and some of them had families. So this was a way for them to provide for their families. So, I had a great coaching staff with the Patroons. I had Brian Bury, the longtime head coach at the College of St. Rose on the men's side, Don Bassett, who was one of George Carl's assistants during the CBA years with the Albany Patroons, Mark Ribsick, Julie McBride. So we had a tremendous staff. I was able to lean on Donnie Bassett quite a bit because of his experiences coaching at the professional level. Julie McBride had played basically 20 years. She had a cup of coffee in the WNBA and then played over in Europe for 18 or 19 years. So just relying on my coaching staff, understanding the types of players that I was coaching, what motivated them, but also trying to make sure that we won games.
Well, the college closes. You're still on campus. We see the pennant behind you. Before we went on the air here, you mentioned you're still there trying to, do the right thing by your players, get them figuring out where they're going to go to college next year, since obviously St. Rose isn't an option. But the question for you is, what are you doing next year? I'm putting you on the spot, Will.
Yeah, that's a great question. We had always taken great pride in being part of this community. This is where we've raised our family. This is all my 2 sons know. My wife's born and raised here. My in-laws are here. My parents are here. So we're kind of at a crossroads right now, trying to figure out, are we really willing to relocate? At what cost will we relocate? I had opportunities the last year or two to move to the Midwest and work in the Big East, and it was going to be a situation where I was going to go by myself
Mm.
because I had no interest in becoming an assistant coach, and this opportunity was special assistant to the head coach, where I was going to be able to work with a first-time head coach at a high level, kind of mentor, teach, and have an integral role.
Mm.
But my wife knew that's really not what I wanted to do. So, but she's the ultimate basketball wife, and I shouldn't even say basketball wife. She's a great wife, and she's like, I know this isn't what you want to really do, but go do it for 8 months and then come on
Mm.
back and we'll figure out the next step. So right now we're kind of in not in limbo, but we're trying to figure out what's best for the family, and then that's really what it's going to come down to. I'm open
And
I'm open to the men's side or the women's side.
throw it out there, Will. Your resume's out there. And on this show, your resume's out there. Because, Will, I know, and I've known you for a long time. We obviously have a personal relationship. But if you know nothing about you, Will Brown, I look at your resume and I go 5 NCAA tournaments at Albany, 1 year at the Patroons. You're the GM. You've never been a pro coach. You lead them to a title. And then you take over St. Rose, who basically, I don't say had the death penalty, but pretty much did when you got there.
Yeah.
And you lead them to the NCAA tournament. So, Will, you can coach. The old lefty Drizel. Yeah, I can coach. Remember the old lefty quote?
Lefty, one best. Well, I appreciate that, Brian. And like anything in this world today, so it's so political out there, and you just look for a good opportunity that makes sense. And if you can get one of those jobs that's in the best interest of you and your family, and it makes sense, then that's what we'll do. But there's a lot of people out there that think getting the next job is easy. There's a lot of coaches out there that want to be head coaches, and anytime a head coaching job opens up, there's hundreds of candidates. So, something will, it always works itself out. So
Yes,
we're
it
excited
does.
about the next chapter, and I know you're trying to push me out of Albany here, but we'll see.
No. Come on. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk. We'll start with the women's game because you obviously just coach women's hoops. South Carolina, they're undefeated. They win the whole thing. They beat Iowa in the finals. Of course, we saw Iowa here in Albany. I know you and your family were at the games. I'll be the first to tell you, Will. I mean, this is just me. And you know me, I've always told the truth, especially on the air. I watched more women's college basketball in the last 2 weeks than I did in the previous 10 years. That is no joke. And I loved it. And I think it's a testament to what Caitlin Clark, South Carolina, Dawn Staley has done for women's hoops. Fair statement.
Agree with you. I think Caitlin Clark has elevated the women's game and made it cool to follow women's basketball. And one of the things that annoys me, and I've been on the men's side forever, but one of the things that annoys me is on the women's side, everyone is talking about we have to elevate women's sports, and we need more people paying attention to women's sports. And then we have a generational talent like Caitlin Clark come around, and what does she do? She elevates women's basketball to an all-time level. And then there's female athletes out there basically taking shots at her. And I think that's something that really bothers me, because there's, every decade, there's great players that have elevated the game. It's just that it hasn't happened at this level. We've never seen it. And you got to give a lot of credit to social media for this as well, and why, the game has been elevated. But Caitlin's supporting cast, good players, but she's not playing with other McDonald's All-Americans.
No.
She's not playing with anyone else that'll be in the WNBA. She took a chance on Iowa, and she elevated that program. So I think what she's done is even more special than what some of these other players have done that are chopping her down. But it's great to see. But I also think we have to throw Dawn Staley in the mix. What she's done for the women's game, what she's done for the program at South Carolina. Honestly, I mean, they were undefeated throughout the regular season a year ago. They just stumbled in the Final Four to a great performance by Caitlin Clark and Iowa. Fast forward to this year, undefeated again. They got the job done. Dawn Staley is an all-time great, and I think that, again, she's helped Caitlin Clark, elevate the game of women's basketball, and it's not slowing down. Juju Watkins from USC is going to be an all-time great if she stays healthy.
Yep.
The two freshmen that come off the bench for South Carolina, Tessa Johnson and Full Wiley, they're both freshmen. They can start at any other program in the country. They went to South Carolina, play for Dawn Staley, and win championships. They're waiting their turn. It's a great time to be a women's college basketball fan.
And I'll just be honest with you. I feel like this, as you mentioned, the Caitlin Clark and having her in Albany and all the hype that went around that. And she sets the scoring record from Maravich at LSU back in the day. Do you feel like a year from now, we're going to have the same excitement? And I know we're looking into a crystal ball. We're going to have the same excitement about women's basketball, and I'm going to just be completely blunt with you. Is this like figure skating in the Olympics? It was great now, and we're going to forget about it for the next year or so. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just interested to see how it pans out,
That's a great question. The second leading scorer in the country this year on the women's side, Juju Watkins, freshman from USC. Nobody on the East Coast is going to see Juju Watkins play next year. The time difference, Caitlin Clark's moving to the WNBA. Will South Carolina be great again? Probably. So I hate to say this, but I think that it's going to be a slow process again. It's going to take a couple of steps back. People are going to wait and see. I just think this Caitlin Clark phenomenon, it's been building for 4 years. It took time. So I do think, unfortunately, it's probably going to take a step or two backwards. I hope it doesn't, but that's what I would guess at this point in time.
I'm going to give you a sink or swim. You remember how it works. You sink and you swim with me. You sink, you disagree. You swim, you agree. Will Caitlin Clark, I'm going to say, I can't ask you a question. I actually have to say it. Caitlin Clark, success in the NBA?
Not in the NBA, but the WNBA.
WNBA, sorry. The WNBA, sorry.
I'm going to swim with Caitlin Clark because I think she knows what she's walking into, and she'll be more than prepared. And unfortunately, I think the WNBA, too many of those players are waiting for her to try to knock her down and, to try to say, hey, this is where the real players are. But she's more than prepared because she doesn't need to score to impact the game. People don't realize not only is she the best three-point shooter and best scorer in college basketball, she's the best passer in college basketball. Yep. She makes her teammates better, and so few scorers have the opportunity or the ability, I should say, to make their teammates better by passing the basketball.
Will, I will throw another sink or swim at you. I'm going to say this. Caitlin Clark was the biggest story in college hoops in the last 15 years. I'd say Jimmer, the way he took over, and Caitlin Clark. Are you swimming with that? Just in terms of captured the college basketball landscape the way no single player had.
I'm going to swim with that without hesitation. And the reason I'm saying you put Caitlin in a category by herself because she's got young boys and young girls watching. She's got women and men interested. I played pickleball 4 or 5 mornings a week. I've got 10 or 12 grown men that I play with. And for the last couple of weeks, all they're talking about is Caitlin Clark. When's the last time that something like that has happened? I don't recall it. So, when you can when you have the eyes of men and women, boys and girls from all over the United States and really all over the world, you're special.
All right, let's shift gears to the men's game. Gosh, there's so much I want to talk to you about men's college basketball. Not only the game with UConn winning their second straight, but just the landscape of it and the way the NIL and the way the portal has changed things. Let's talk first about the college national championship. UConn winning their second straight, dominant fashion, 75-60. Well, I've followed college. I mean, you obviously would know way more about the sport than me, but, I followed college basketball since like 79, 80. I don't think I've ever seen an offense do as many things as Hurley's offense does. Nobody stops moving. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, the ball movement, the player movement, the way that they bring Clan away from the basket. He handles the ball quite a bit at the top of the key for them, which opens up driving lanes. Yeah, they do a lot of good things, very difficult to guard, a lot of misdirection. Danny Hurley right now is the coach in college basketball. Back-to-back national titles, the preparation, the way they play both sides of the ball. Their game plan for Purdue was tremendous. They were willing to give up 50 to Edey, but they were not going to allow Purdue to shoot the three, and they were going to force those small guards of Purdue to make tough twos. So Edey had 35, and UConn won by nearly 20. And you can't key in on player for UConn. You take one player away, four others are going to beat you. So I'm just so impressed with how they play both sides of the ball and how tough they are.
You look at, they won back-to-back national championships for the first time since Florida. And I remember old school UAlbany when you guys played Florida. You hung tough with them. I think that was 05-06 year, wasn't it?
The year they
won the
first national title.
Yep, 05-06. You all played them tough. That was talk about that real quick, because that team was 4 or 5 NBA players. I mean, they were ridiculous.
Yeah, they had Joakim Noah, Al Horford. They had the long 6'6", 6'7" wing. I don't know why I can't remember his name, but we went down there and we were either up 1 or down 1 at the half. But the last play of the first half, Jamar Wilson stole the ball and goes down in transition. Hard foul. He goes into the basket. He comes up and he's limping, and he tweaked his groin and played a little bit in the second half, but he wasn't effective. He had gotten hurt. But to see how good they were up close and live, I mean, big, physical, and like you said, a bunch of those guys went on to play in the NBA. It's hard to win one. Now think about winning 2. You have to be good. You have to stay healthy. You have to have some luck on your side, and you have to have really good coaching. So I've got a great appreciation for what Billy Donovan did with that team at Florida, and what Danny Hurley just accomplished. What's going to be interesting at UConn, if he stays at UConn, is can they win a third? Because I'm not sure who's going to come back. So they might have a major roster rebuild because of how many guys they're going to have that are out of eligibility or that are going to be selected in the NBA draft.
Well, wait 1 second. I got to get a plug for my computer.
I need one
rolling.
too.
Keep rolling. Just keep rolling. Wait.
Yeah.
Let me hang on.
Do you have a charger?
All right, Will, that's a great point as far as Florida and then UConn, who's coming back. I think that one of the most amazing things about the UConn run was that Hurley essentially had almost a brand new team. I mean, I think Clingan may have led the team last year in minutes with like 10 minutes off the bench, but everybody else was either a transfer, was new. I mean, it was unbelievable that whereas Florida, we talked about them, who you played back in the day, it was majority of the same guys, the same core. UConn was completely different, and he still manages to get the deal done. That's what I found remarkable about this second championship.
Well, nowadays, I mean, the world of college athletics has changed. Those players that were at Florida, they were going to stay at Florida or go to the NBA. Now we're in the world of NIL and transfer portal, and instant success. Nobody's waiting their turn. Nobody's developing. It's like, hey, if I'm not playing right now, I'm leaving. So it's a credit to, what Danny Hurley and his staff have been able to do, because it's difficult. Roster management is your number one priority right now, and rosters are going to change for the most part every year. So if you can keep your core group together, you're going to be way ahead of the game.
All right, let's talk about that, because you led the perfect transition segue, if you will, into my next point, and that is the NIL, the licensing agreement. Players, quote unquote, now allowed to get paid, through these deals. Clearly, the colleges with the deepest pockets have more money to spend, which are going to attract players from mid majors like the U Albanys, like the Siennas, like the MAC schools. Do you like this? I mean, be honest. Do you like the way this is, not the way it's transpired, but the idea? Because personally, me, Brian Sinkoff, I hate it. But let me hear your thoughts.
Well, whether I like it or not probably doesn't matter, because it's only going to get worse before it gets better. But I will say this: I'm more of an old soul, an old school mentality. There's not much of an appreciation anymore for a scholarship. But I do think everyone else is making money off these student athletes. I do think the student athletes deserve an opportunity to make some money. The problem that I have is NIL it wasn't supposed to be pay for play.
Right.
And that's exactly what it is. It's basically like the colleges are now like minor league systems. You're paying, and then in the same locker room, guys could be making different amounts of money. You might have a guy struggling, averaging 4 points a game, making more money than someone that's averaging 12, 13 points a game. Or at the end of a season, hey, coach, I made 100,000 this year. I'll come back for 250. Otherwise, I'm going to jump in the portal. All of these players now, they're allowed to sign with agents as long as they're registered with the NCAA. So now you have agents in players' ears during the season. The handshake lines. Hey, really love the way you play. You want to make real money? Come play with us. Yeah, next year. So I don't like it. I know everyone says, well, coaches can leave whenever they want. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I don't know how you manage it, how you make it better. I do think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Less loyalty involved. I think now it's all about how much money I can make. It's become a social club for basketball players, the transfer portal. You have kids at the low Division I level averaging 10 points a game, jumping in the portal, looking for a payday. If you're averaging 10 at the low Division I level,
Right.
you probably belong at the low Division I level. And there's going to be players when it's all said and done in late August that are stuck with no place to go.
Well, can you explain? I mean, I know, but I want you to explain for me and the people out there watching and listening on the podcast. Again, you're listening to Sound Off with Sinkoff, sponsored by the Sinkoff Realty Group. We're with Will Brown, current St. Rose women's coach. His resume's out there, people. So Kentucky, if you're listening, I mean, I'm sure you deal well with Lexington, right?
I like blue.
We all like green too.
Yeah.
Well, explain the NIL and sort of how this works. So a player can, a college, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, but a college has a certain dollar amount in the piggy bank to spend on that money. And then they divvy it up to the players, and the players just get that money. Do they have to do anything? Do they have to appear in a commercial, or it's here's $100,000, you're on our team?
See, originally, coaches weren't supposed to be brokering deals during the recruiting process. It was okay for the student athlete to go out and broker their own deals, and,
Right.
So now and again, I'm not claiming to know exactly what's happening, but I've watched this, closely, and the NCAA, I'm sure they know that deals are being brokered. Coaches are going to, Joe Smith Ford and talking to
Right.
Joe Smith Ford, and they're wheeling and dealing. It's going on. And, the NIL was meant for players, name, image, and likeness, for players to be able to, have a value where they can make some money, based on, like you had mentioned, if a car dealership wants to endorse a player and the player thinks it's a good fit and the player wants to work with the car dealership, whether it's a certain amount of social media posts or doing a commercial, everything's supposed to be registered, documented. How did it come about? You have to make sure that, the head coach didn't take care of this himself or nobody on the coaching staff. But it's become the wild, wild west.
I was just going to
And
say that. Literally just going to say that. Yep.
it's a free-for-all out there.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these kids, and I don't blame them, they want to cash in because they see other kids cashing in. And, I'd like to believe that athletic departments all throughout the country are having NIL seminars, and they're meeting with each team and coaching staffs to go over the do's and the don'ts. The other thing you have to worry about, from what I understand, each state has their own laws as well. So like the NCAA, I think, has to be careful, because if the state of Florida says it's okay to do this, well, can the NCAA prevent them from doing that? So I think there's a lot that everyone involved didn't really understand or didn't expect. And now I think nobody knows what to do.
There's a lot of unintended consequences, I think, is the good term.
And some intended.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's go back to your example, because I talked to a lot of college hoops people, to television people, just various people sort of in the know. And a couple of people said, and kind of the way you said, Brian, I think the NIL is going to almost police itself in a way. It's going to, like you said, it's probably going to get worse, then it's going to get better. But I'm going to give you like one of the things I pointed out to them, and they're like, that's probably one of the ways it's going to police itself. So let's hear me out on this, Coach. Sinkoff Volvo, right, gives a player, $500,000 to X university's basketball department. They get Will Brown's son to come there, right? Just hear me out. They get your son to come there, or whatever. I don't want to use your son. Just they get someone to come there, Johnny Jones to come there. Johnny gets $300,000 from the auto dealership. Johnny hates the school. Johnny doesn't like it. Johnny gets more money somewhere else. That auto dealership just lost $300,000 for a guy that wasn't as good as advertised and then bolted after 1 year. Does the Sinkoff Volvo decide to give the college $300,000 again? I mean, right?
Well, that's a great point, because I've heard stories that disgruntled players would wait till they got their paychecks and then they'd quit. And then what a lot of people haven't thought enough of is, when does donor fatigue set in?
Exactly.
All right? Because originally you're asking donors to donate to your university, to your athletic department, and to your football or basketball program. Okay. So those same people that you've been hitting up for money year after year after year, those are the same people now you have to add NIL to the ask. And then what happens when those players don't pan out?
Or leave.
Right? So, and these powerful donors, the other thing too is they have so much money that they can influence whether people keep their jobs or lose their jobs on a college campus as well. So I like to say it still is the great unknown. And it'll be interesting to see how the NCAA handles it moving forward. But I'm not sure if you saw Purdue coach Matt Painter talk about NIL the other day. And he said a lot of people think the NIL was set up so the programs with the deepest pockets can buy the best players. He goes, and all NIL has done is allow the people that were cheating before. It's just made it legal for them.
Yep. I mean, because we know, I'm not saying you, I don't want to, I know it happened. I absolutely know it happened. For decades, it's been happening.
I can really appreciate a program like Purdue because I don't think that their program is going to live and die with NIL. If you look at their roster, I don't think there's a McDonald's All-American on their roster. And Matt Painter, I think, is an old school coach where he doesn't have the 5 stars or even the 4 stars. He gets good players and he develops them. Whereas now it's, all right, how many players can we buy? And some of these players you're only going to have for 7 or 8 months. And what return are you getting on that investment?
Explain because back in the day, and we're talking when I started following college hoops, and even up to 5 years ago, the transferring. And we have the transfer portal. Transferring, if you transferred, you had to sit out 1 year. I guess recently, Logan Aaronholt, like he went to Maryland for grad school. Mike Terps, baby.
But those were grad transfers.
Those were right. So you had the graduate transfer exception. Now it's you can transfer, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. You can transfer. You don't have to sit out a year. And are you allowed to transfer only once? Forget the COVID times, because I know that was the wild, wild west.
No, now, and this is why, it's the wild, wild west on steroids, because now you can transfer an unlimited amount of times and be eligible immediately.
So there's no limit.
4 schools in 4 years. That's what you want to do. If you can keep getting bigger paychecks each step of the way, you can make a lot of money, play at 4 different schools. I think the only thing that you're going to have to worry about moving forward is you will have to meet progress towards degree requirements. And as you know, when you transfer from institution to institution, usually all of your credits do not transfer with you. So that's one thing that you do have to be careful of. To be eligible at your next school, you have to meet progress towards degree requirements. Not really difficult as a freshman or a sophomore, but once you transfer into your junior or senior year, that's where you're walking that fine line towards progress towards degree.
So, if you're at a mid-May, and let's go back to you at Albany, and you didn't really have to deal with this prior to you, during your tenure. Obviously, guys would leave, and you had, instances where whatever. But by and large, you didn't have someone looking for the better payday. Boy, doesn't this really hurt, this NIL and transfer portal? Doesn't this really destroy mid-majors? I mean, it look at all the transfers. Heck, my school got guys from mid-majors. We're talking Maryland. Look at all the transfers that are going to leave these mid-major schools to go to the bigger school and bigger payday.
Most coaches I talk to at the low major and mid-major Division I level aren't recruiting freshmen. They don't want a good freshman because they know they're going to be gone. Now, after a year, they have a good year, they're gone. But now some of them have changed their tune a little bit because kids are leaving regardless after 1 year. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So but their sell now is, hey, we'll be like the minor league. We'll be like AAA, or we'll be like the prep school. Come to us for a year, have a great year, and we'll help you get to a higher level. So there's a method to the madness. I think coaches that are ignoring it are going to struggle. The coaches that are trying to be creative with their recruiting are going to be the coaches that thrive. And every year is a new year. Unfortunately, you could have 8 or 9 new players on your roster every single year. So I think the ones that are being creative and open to helping those young players move on are going to reap the benefits of it.
All right. So you're a coach at a mid-major. How are you I mean, I want you to peel back the curtain a little bit when you recruited. But before I get into that, how are you? Are you even, if you're a mid-major now, are you even looking at high school freshmen? Like, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Your job was so difficult before. I imagine it would be triply difficult at a mid-major now.
Yeah, when I was at Albany, the only thing we ran into was grad transfers, because if you graduated and had a year to play, you can go anywhere you wanted and you were eligible right away. So I lost Logan Aaronholt to Maryland. And the one that hurt us the most is I lost Joe Cremo to Villanova, who were the defending national champions at the time. And in that same year, I lost David Nichols to Florida State, who was coming on in the Elite Eight appearance. We had won, I believe, 23 games that year. We would have been picked 1A or 1B the following year with Vermont. And instead, because there was no transfer portal at that time, I can't replace those two guys. Now, with the transfer portal, a lot easier to replace those guys, not guys that had experience in your program, but you can get two really talented guys that could help you stay in the top 2 or 3 in your league. Now there's coaches that this is the way it's going with college recruiting right now. Number 1 priority, transfer portal. Number 2, junior college. Number 3, prep school, and a distant 4th, regular high school kids.
Wow.
But now it's trickling down all the way to Division III. So if you're a Division II coach, there's so many kids that aren't being recruited at the high school and prep school level, you can steal a really good player. But again, he's leaving after a year.
Right.
The Division III kids, a lot of them paying to go to school. All right, if I have a good year, whether I'm a freshman or a sophomore, I'll transfer to Division II and I can get a scholarship. So it's going all the way down to Division III. So I think all levels of basketball are being impacted right now by the transfer portal.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, we'll switch gears because I find that stuff so fascinating. I love the inner workings of the behind the scenes and peeling back the curtain. Before I get into Calipari, let's talk a little bit about how was it for you? Let's go back to your UAlbany days. How was it for you? How difficult? Because I've talked to so many college coaches and they said, Brian, we're grinding, we're doing the game plans, we're doing the season, and then we're recruiting. And forget the portal, forget the NIL. How difficult is that job to recruit and always be ahead of the game and finding the next diamond in the rough? How hard was that to do, especially at a mid-major?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can get caught up in your season and be consumed with your season, and you need to be consumed with your season. You owe it to the student athletes in your program. I always felt that the most important, the student athletes in our program are more important than any recruit that we potentially could get, because there's no guarantee we're going to get that recruit. So we had to really spend an awful lot of time with the players in our program. But recruiting is the lifeline of a program, as you know, and you have to make sure you find that balance. During off days, you're every 7th day you have to have off once your season starts. Well, coaches can't have off on those days. You have to get out and you have to recruit. So if you have a head coach and 3 assistants, you have to be out. You have to be working the phones. You have to be sending the emails. You have to make the recruits feel important. You have to be visible. You have to show them love, but you can't forget about the student athletes that are currently in your program, and the season that you're in. And, for us, we're always trying to win an America East Conference championship, get to the NCAA tournament. But it's a balancing act, and you have to find that happy medium, and find something that works for you as a program.
All right, before we get to Cal, let's talk about the NCAA tournament and your experience in it, because we just watched UConn. We watched South Carolina on the women's side. You played in the tournament 5 years. You captured the Capital Region almost every time you were in the tournament, especially going back to 05-06 against that talented UConn team. What was the experience like for you, Coach, as a head coach on the biggest stage, getting the exposure, and then more importantly, getting an exposure for the Capital Region and for your school?
It's an unbelievable experience. And I would tell kids when we were recruiting them, and the kids that were in our program, one of the goals I had is to make sure that every player experienced the NCAA tournament. To me, it's the biggest thing in sports for a month. I mean, it's March Madness for 4 to 5 weeks. Everyone, whether you're a basketball fan or not, follows the NCAA tournament, because I look at it this way. There might be somebody that has no interest in basketball, but they graduated from a certain school,
Mhm.
or wherever you work, there's an office pool. So you're
Yep.
in an office pool and you're following that. But for me, from a selfish standpoint as a head coach, my first NCAA tournament, I had an opportunity to coach against John Calipari, Hall of Famer. One of the other appearances we made, I had a chance to match wits with Coach K.
Mm-hmm.
And get from when you're in a one bid league, I'll use the University at Albany, for instance, what it means to that institution as far as, applications, the application process. Our admissions department would always tell me applications are through the roof.
Right.
The advertising for those 2 hours when we're on CBS Sports and Albany is flashing. 4 of the 5 games that we played were really tight games. And the one game that wasn't, the year we lost to Virginia, that's
Virginia, yep.
probably the year that everyone picked us.
Yep.
Willis picked us as the upset special because the year before we led UConn for 35 minutes. And I think that's where the pressure really got to us. We made one of our first 18 shots against the co-ACC regular season champions. Game over.
I was at that game. It was in Columbus.
Well, I'm sorry
Right?
you had to witness that.
Yeah, no. Look, it was amazing to watch and cover. I was at the time, I was still at Channel 10.
But Brian, what
But
people don't realize is we're coming from a one bid league. So
Right.
you can have a great regular season, and if you stumble in the conference tournament, you don't get an opportunity. Now, if a North Carolina loses in the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament, all right, did our seed drop? Are we going from a 2 to a 3, a 3 to a 4 to a 5? If you are a favorite in the conference tournament in the America East Conference and you lose, your season's probably over.
It's tough. It's tough. All right, let's talk about Coach Calipari going to Arkansas. Gets roughly $8 million a year, a 5-year deal. They're going to have $5 million for the NIL fund per year. Candidly, why does somebody leave Kentucky for Arkansas? Had he worn out his welcome? Was he sick of the school? Was the alumni sick of him? Is there what is your gut? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Probably all of the above. I think in this situation, John Calipari had a certain way to go about running his program. And recruiting wise, it was all about getting the best high school players in the country. I don't think there's a better recruiter in college basketball than John Calipari.
I agree.
But since COVID, they've struggled a little bit in regards to success in the NCAA tournament. Pre-COVID, what John Calipari did was, it's Hall of Fame type stuff. And he is a Hall of Famer. Now, post-COVID, the game has gotten older.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is to get old and stay old. So if you have 18-year-old freshmen who long-term are going to be tremendous pros, but you're playing 23 and 24-year-old mid-major players or high-major players, it's hard over 6 games. It's hard to win a national championship with kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, some people say he didn't adapt to that. Okay. Right. But that was his decision. Who's going to question him? Look at his success. His track record is, second to none. So I think what you mentioned earlier, I think, alumni maybe were getting upset. The fan base, why isn't he maximizing the transfer portal? If he can get the best high school players in the country, he should be able to get the best players out of the transfer portal. It's just a difference in philosophy. So I think he's like, you know what? Maybe I'm not appreciated here as much as I once was. So I'm going to go build something special at a place like Arkansas, where they'll probably pay me a similar amount. I'll have unbelievable resources and NIL money. and I'm going to start fresh. Maybe he just needed a fresh start.
Well, and you also have to look at the all of the lotto picks, 35 lottery picks since he took over at Kentucky. Um, I'll be completely blunt with you, and college kids better than I do for sure, but a team with 4 or 5 lotto picks, I don't think they're stressing out over the second round game against, Gonzaga. I think they're looking at the NBA draft in 2 months. I mean, are they devastated they lost? Yeah, they're upset, but are they looking at the payday? Absolutely. And that was almost every guy on his roster.
Yeah, well said. For them, they're so young. They know they're going to be pros. Life goes on, and they forget about that quickly.
Yep.
I think what a lot of people on the outside don't realize is the relationships that Calipari developed with those players. I look at Devin Booker. He came off the bench for Kentucky as a freshman at 18 years old. How good would Devin Booker be at 20 at Kentucky? How good would Reed Shepherd be at 20 at Kentucky? He was the freshman of the year. I think he's projected as a lottery pick right now, 18-year-old kid. He's not going to be at Kentucky at 20. He's going to be in the NBA. So I look at it this way too, Brian. If Calipari didn't take the McDonald's All-Americans, but he took guys that were ranked between 150 and 300, and they stayed 3 years, and they were 18 and 12, would the fan base be happy? They wouldn't be happy, but yet those kids stayed for 3 years. I think what they were probably looking for is, we want Devin Booker, but we also want the best player in the transfer portal. All right. We want Reed Shepherd, but we want the best player in the transfer portal. Let's mix the young and old. But, this is the last year of the COVID players.
Right.
But I think a lot of college coaches learned something through COVID. Get old, stay old. So I don't think that's going to change. So it'll be interesting to see what he does at Arkansas, if he uses the transfer portal more, or if he's just going to take that same philosophy of getting the best McDonald's All-Americans and see what happens.
And you look at UConn, the men's national champion, what did they have? Seniors, transfers, young guys that cut their teeth on the bench a little bit in terms of Klingon, who was the big man who played 10 minutes last year. We did not see that pre-COVID with the bigger schools. You saw roster turnover almost every year. There were very few upperclassmen. And
look at the starting lineup for UConn. Newton, transfer from East Carolina. Spencer, transfer from Rutgers, best player at Rutgers last year. Then look at Castle, McDonald's All-American freshman. Caravan, redshirt sophomore. All right. And then Klingon, sophomore. Both of Caravan and Klingon were brought in, as high school guys. So there's a nice mix, nice balance. There's 6-man Diarra, transfer, I believe, from Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Samson Johnson, the backup center, was a high school kid. So I think what Hurley's done is he's found the right mix of high school and also transfer portal. And I saw him this morning, and this was really impressive. They asked him about his recruiting and what's important to him. And he said recruiting the parents. And then they're like, can you elaborate on that? He goes, yeah. He goes, I don't want the parents that are their son's basketball fans.
Mm-hmm.
I want the parents that are going to hold their kid accountable, that are going to kick him in the rear end, that are going to get in their face, because that's what I'm going to do. And I want the parents that are going to back me up when I do it.
And we should just point out on a side note that UConn's, I think, the master of the offense, Coach Murray, Bill Murray's son, right?
Caddyshack, baby.
How cool is that? Like a lot of people, they thought this guy got the gig because his dad's Bill Murray, but the guy's like a serious, and his first name is escaping me.
Luke Murray.
Yeah, but he's a serious basketball brain, isn't he? He's probably going to get a job. He's going to get a job somewhere, I'm sure.
The hard thing with a guy like him is he's making so much money right now, and he'll get a raise for this national championship, and they have such a good thing going that he can be selective in what jobs he takes. And the crazy thing is, we all know Bill Murray, we know Caddyshack and Ghostbusters and all that stuff. You know, these young kids, they have no idea.
They have no clue.
No idea.
They have no clue who he is. None. But I find that like that kind of got lost a little bit over the last couple of weeks is this guy who I think is maybe the architect, maybe the brains of some of that offense. It's just such a Hollywood family, so funny. But Will, we really appreciate you coming on. This was a great time, and I wish you luck in your future endeavors. You're a good guy. You're a great coach, and really appreciate you taking the time with me here.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I know you're crushing it with your real estate business. And more importantly, I love the fact that you're back in the sports game with the podcast. And, I'm probably going to be your least famous guest because I know how you roll. No. But hopefully you continue to do this, and I can jump back on sometime in the future.
We would love to have you. And Will, you're my first guest, so you will always be remembered for that. But you were on a serious note, you were always great with me when we had Sound Off with Sinkoff, and even going back to the Channel 10 days, you were one of the funniest interviews. And what I loved about you, Will, and I'll just tell you this, I don't want to embarrass you. You understood how to play the game. You knew media was important. You never turned down an interview, good, bad, or ugly. And that's what I respect about you. And I really mean that.
Well, you were one of the true professionals, and I always appreciated the coverage. And I know that you guys have a really difficult job in the media, and we can't just want the coverage when things are going well. We need to own it when we're struggling and things aren't going well. And you were always a pleasure to work with. So, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to watching this podcast grow because I know you're going to crush it.
Thanks, buddy. Will, good luck to you. Say hi to the family, and good luck in the future.
Right back at you. Thank you.
All right. Take care. That is Will Brown, of course, UAlbany. He is the head coach of the Great Danes. And thanks so much for watching Sound Off with Sinkoff. Plenty of great guests coming along, as Will just said, and we appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.